As you all know, viewers, Israel remotely detonated hundreds of handheld pagers used by members of Lebanon's Hezbollah, killing at least 12 people. 2 children were among the fatalities of the terror attack, which also wounded thousands and overwhelmed Lebanese hospitals. The following day, walkie-talkies exploded across the country, ending 20 lives. 2 days after that, on Friday, this is all last week, an airstrike on a densely populated neighborhood in the Lebanese capital of Beirut killed scores of people, and on Monday, this week, the Israeli military commenced a bombing spree over various sectors of Lebanon that has killed more than 550 people, including 50 children. Many are now accusing Israel of going too far, of abusing its military superiority, and are demanding that its leadership be tried for war crimes. Tel Aviv has hit back at its critics, saying that the tiny nation is in danger of being run over by its neighbors, who are sheltering anti-Semitic terror groups sworn to wipe out Jews as a people and Israel as a nation. Many Indians, of course, viewers, identify with the struggles that Israel faces, given that India too is a victim of cross-border terror. India is a victim in a neighborhood where our neighboring countries, who we expect to have good relations with, harbor terrorists who are sworn to the annihilation of our nation. These are well-known facts, viewers. Does fundamentally India have the right to take steps to protect its territorial integrity? All of you, I'm sure, would say yes. And India, of course, exercised that right when it carried out the Balakot strikes. Even then, a large number of people had said that, look, let's not let matters escalate, go out of hand. It would be better not to carry out these cross-border strikes because you're dealing, after all, with a nuclear power. Of course, Israel doesn't have that problem, at least on the face of it. It is not dealing with enemies that have nuclear arsenals, and there is visibly a difference in military capacities. And it is because of this, a large number of people say that Israel should go to a point, but not any further. The question is whether Israel is transgressing basic human rights, or is, as Tel Aviv says, it is acting well within its rights. And fundamentally, viewers, we are going to pose those questions this evening to our very informed panel. And I want to open this up by first beginning with Mr. Dawood Kutab, who joins us from Palestine, I'm told. Mr. Kutab, thank you very much for speaking with us. We also have with us Nadav Stenman, who is going to be joining us from Israel. He's the board chair of the ILF. We also have with us Major Gaurav Arya, and of course, a diplomat turned author turned many things, Pavan Verma. Now, I want to first begin with Dawood Kutab. Mr. Kutab, the Israelis are acting out of a sense of self-preservation. That's what Tel Aviv says. And they are not going after civilians, they are going after individuals who are non-state actors, who are terrorists, and who will not look at international law twice before they attack Israel, as they did on October 7th. Therefore, its actions are legitimate. How do you respond to this view?
Well, I'm glad you brought October 7th, because I think that's where the discussion is to be going on. Because if there was a peace agreement, a ceasefire agreement that many Israelis want, and the Americans want, and the United Nations Security Council called for, there would not be a problem in the Lebanese border. So I think you are right in pointing out that the problem is in Gaza and needs to be resolved in Gaza before we can talk about other areas. But, you know, there is a conflict that is both political and security. And what everybody has learned, all the security analysts, is that there is a limit to what the military might can do. Yes, Israel is a powerful country, but power using military is not enough. You need to also have a political process, and you need to have an end game. Thomas Friedman today wrote in the New York Times that the problem with the Israeli leadership, and Netanyahu especially, is that they have a short-term goal, but they don't have a long-term goal. What we need is a peace agreement between Israelis and Palestinians. Nasrallah from Hezbollah said, the moment that there is an agreement in Gaza, there will be no more fighting, no more attacks from Lebanon, because Lebanon is supporting the fellow Palestinians in Gaza. So I think you're right that the issue of Gaza needs to be resolved, and needs to be resolved immediately. And half the Israelis, if not more, also agree to that.
Let me, before I bring in Mr. Stenman, let me quickly come back to you, Mr. Kutab. Mr. Kutab, the problem here is that Israel says that, look, these terrorists who are sworn to the annihilation of the country are also finding safe passage or havens in Lebanon. And therefore, even if we were to have a peace with Gaza, etc., to our south, we've still got a problem in our northeast. How do we address that concern of Israel when there are individuals who are in Lebanon who will not think twice about attacking Jewish settlers to the northeast?
Well, as you said, they're settlers, and that's a good word. The problem is that your information is not exactly correct. Hezbollah is supporting Gaza. Nasrallah every day goes on the air, speaks to anybody who wants to listen. We are not fighting with Israel. We're only supporting our fellow Palestinians. The Hezbollah has been very, very clear in its attacks. They've attacked military targets. Every attack has been called a military target. They have not widened the attacks until the Israelis blew up the pagers in hospitals, in schools, wherever people were. Everybody's saying that the way they used the pager, yes, it was immediately with the Hezbollah people. But the problem is, again, we need a political solution. There is a limit to what you can do with the military. And unfortunately, the Israelis don't understand that they need to make peace with the Palestinians. Arabs, the Saudis are interested in making normalization with Israel as soon as they solve the Palestinian problem. The Israelis don't want. They want the land without the people. And they want to extend the war until I don't know what. But they need to find a political solution.
Mr. Stenman, how do you respond to what Mr. Kutab has said?
Thank you for having me on your show, Mr. Kutab. With respect, there is a political solution that has been on the books in accordance with international law since 2006. It's called UN Resolution 1701, whereby the United Nations agreed and the world agreed in that Hezbollah would be moved to north of the Litani River, and the territory to the south of the Litani River would be patrolled by UNIFIL troops as well as the armed forces of Lebanon. Israel has agreed to that principles for the past however many years, that is 18 years. To say that there has been discriminate firing from Hezbollah to Israel is unfortunately not fact, it's rhetoric. Let's speak to fact, because it was only a few weeks ago where children in a Druze village who are Muslims as well were attacked by Hezbollah missiles, and of which 12 children were killed. There's been indiscriminate bombing of close to 10,000 bombs that have and artillery from Lebanon since the 8th of October of last year. This has been unprovoked. All that Israel has done is ask that the world, including India and every other country, would agree to the international law that is in place already, that has been agreed to. Nevertheless, a few days ago, one quarter of Israeli population had to be in shelters while we were being bombed by Hezbollah. To say that it's just directed at military targets is false. Assuming 400 million people in India were being forced to live in shelters due to rockets being fired by their neighbors, I don't know what the response of India would be, but I don't think it would just sit back and agree to accept more. Nevertheless, Israel is only being asked to defend itself. But what does defense mean? Are we not permitted to attack the actual combatants? That is what happened. We did the most We did a distinguished attack against, if that was Israel, Israel's not admitted to it, the distinguished attack with the beepers. There was, unfortunately, 2 children were killed. That is a very unfortunate and sad thing. However, notwithstanding that, it was the most distinguished attack because it was distinguished between civilians and combatants. The actual pagers that were held in the hands of Hezbollah were done on the order of Nasrallah, who said you cannot use cell phones. The actual targeting of those pagers themselves, they are a military target, which is permitted under international law, together with the people who are using them for military and terrorist purposes. These are facts.
Right.
I believe that Israel's position is, and today this is being discussed at the UN, if Hezbollah pulls back to the Litani River in accordance what is supposed to be as a matter of law, the situation with Lebanon would end. Israel's not at war with Lebanon. Israel is at war with a jihadist, genocidal group called Hezbollah, who publicly announces that their desire is not to help Palestinians or create a Palestinian state, but they say publicly and repeatedly that their goal is to annihilate and kill all the Jews and to rid Israel of its millions of Jewish citizens.
Okay.
Are we not allowed? Sorry.
Okay, so Mr. Steinman, should Israel obey UN resolutions on ending the Gaza occupation? I just want to tell our viewers that India abstained from that particular vote that was moved by Palestine against Israel just a few days back. How do you respond to that resolution and the terms of that resolution? Should they be obeyed or should they not be obeyed, or who does the onus devolve upon?
I think when you have things that have not been agreed to by both parties and by both parties in the fight, where it is coming from overhead without their agreement, when Israel is asking to end its defensive war and Hamas is asked to do nothing, it seems to be illogical and under the context of international law. There are laws of war, the rest, which I will claim that under international law, Israel is permitted to do the things that they do. It's taking careful steps. What is happening, everything is done proportionately in accordance with the laws, international humanitarian law, the laws of war. I will also assert that there comes a time when the world must look at both sides, where Israel is only permitted under the doctrine of the UN to defend itself. It's never allowed to take defensive measures to actually prevent its own annihilation and only to respond to missiles and other threats of war that are being attacked at them all the time. All we were asking is that there's legitimacy on both sides.
Okay.
I reject the claim that Hezbollah is there simply to help the Palestinian people. Hezbollah is not seeking for a Palestinian state or a two-state solution or all the other terminology we hear throughout the world. Hezbollah has only one aim, and that aim is to rid the Middle East of Jews. That's what they say. This isn't rhetoric. This is what they say. These are the facts. Okay.
Look, I mean, we can obviously continue on with Mr. Kutab and Mr. Steinman, but I want to open this up for just a few moments. Mr. Verma, let me bring you in, and also Major Arya. Mr. Verma, I want to ask you this question because it's often posed. Is lawfare being waged upon Israel along ideological lines? Is that really what's happening?
Well, in my view, thank you, Rahul. In my view, the Israel-Palestinian issue today cannot be separated from its past, because there are reasons for grievances on both sides. And in my view, while I know that Israel is a friend, I feel that in the origins of Israel, where it is today, showed remarkable hypocrisy on the part of the West, particularly Britain, which unilaterally in colonial times, in 1916, through the Balfour Declaration and beyond, decided to create an Israeli state in what was decidedly, for many millennia, an Arab territory. And the Arabs and Israelis have lived peaceably together for centuries. But when you create another state in territory which has traditionally belonged to you, which is a militarized state backed by the West to the teeth, there is bound to be conflict. But anyway, that background can be discussed endlessly. I am certainly against terrorism, but I am equally against genocide and state terrorism. And we have to distinguish between this. I condemn the attack of Hamas on 7th October in Israel, where 1,100 and, if I am right, 39 people died and 251 were taken hostage. Now, in response, according to official figures of the UN, up to 13th May 2024, Israeli attacks in the Gaza Strip and elsewhere in the neighborhood have killed 35,000 people, of which 7,797 are minors, 4,959 are women, 1,924 are elderly, 10,000 have been disabled by injuries, and actually people say that these figures are conservative, and by some sources the actual number of dead or missing is in the vicinity of over 300,000. In fact, the situation is that there is famine, there is starvation, and now even body bags cannot be found to bury the number of the dead. In such a situation, I would think that right now the imperative is, and the UN has called for it, the USA has called for it. Most recently, President Macron at the UN said Israel cannot continue with its bombings of Gaza and death of civilians and its plans to invade Lebanon. The US has called for a 21-day ceasefire to give the time to talk. But I have a feeling now that Israel, backed to the teeth by weapons supplied by the United States and other Western countries, is fighting a war to the finish which is frankly primitive. It is medieval. There are, by the way, if there are refugees, that the Jews have historically suffered the tragedy of being refugees across the world. There are some 15 million Palestinians today all over the world as refugees. And so many refugee camps exist. As many as 40,000 around Gaza, and in Gaza people are living in refugee shelters.
Right.
So I believe that the current bombing that Israel is carrying out with the most sophisticated weapons is actually aimed at annihilation, which it says Hezbollah is trying to do to it.
Okay.
In other words, we are facing an impasse, and that can only be solved by talks and negotiation, because
Okay.
there is history on both sides.
Okay.
Israel has never implemented the 1967 UN Security Council resolution of vacating Gaza, the West Bank, and therefore there has never been a lasting and enduring peace where both states can live and be recognized and be at peace.
Well, I agree with you on certain points, but it takes two to tango, and the Hamas exactly hasn't acquitted itself in the best capacities either, and we know that history too. So, without getting into a obvious, who said what and when and how, let me bring in an ex-armyman here to give us a perspective from a strategic point of view. So, I want to ask you, Major Arya, has Israel gone too far in the pursuit of its strategic aims? Is this really a war to sort of impose a final solution, so to speak, in reverse, as Pawan Verma was suggesting? How do you look upon this?
See, I've heard Ambassador Pawan Verma, and I've heard Mr. Dawood Qutb also, and I very strongly disagree, because there are two things. First of all, most of these figures quoted in the media are the so-called health ministry of Hamas. And Hamas is a terror organization. It doesn't matter if India has declared it a terror organization or not. Hamas and Hezbollah both are terror organizations, number one. Number two, the reason for civilian casualties is different. It is not that Israel is saying, oh, today is a good day, let me kill some civilians. The thing is that they put rockets and missiles and artillery in heavily populated areas. So in military parlance, what you call CV, counter bombardment. When a missile takes off from a school in Gaza and it hits an Israeli post or an Israeli populated center, the computer calculates the trajectory and the parabola of that missile. And your counter bombardment is going to land at the point of origin. Now, here the point of origin happens to be a school or a hospital or a shopping mall or a school. So you see, that is what the Hezbollah and the Hamas want. They want maximum casualties because that is how they gain public sympathy. Now, 2-3 things. You spoke about the Balfour Declaration, and somebody will talk about the Peel Commission. The fact of the matter is that Israel has been attacked. And I'll tell you the problem. You can glamorize the problem by saying that it's a political problem and this. No. To answer your first question, has Israel gone far enough? Absolutely not. What is the aim? From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Which river and which sea? The problem is not that Israel has quote unquote, and I'm saying quote unquote, occupied areas. That is not the problem. The problem is that they are Jews. The problem is that they are Jews. And this whole story about everybody living in peace amongst each other, the Arabs, and there would have been moments of peace, but there have been moments of conflict also. Why did the Jews roam the world for more than 2 millennia? Because they were at peace where they were staying? No. There was genocide against the Jews. Now, my last point that I wish to make, Rahul, is yes, there have been civilian casualties on both the sides. The problem is that the IDF tried its best to avoid civilian casualties. Hamas and Hezbollah, on the other hand, want civilian casualties because it's good for the cameras. They are genocidal maniacs. And if you say that the IDF has gone far enough, no, it has not even gone 20% of how I want them to go. Unless you wipe out Hamas, unless you wipe out Hezbollah, there will be no peace because they don't. This has nothing to do with, oh, you've taken West Bank and oh, you've occupied Gaza and oh, you've done this. This is nonsensical argument. They hate them because they are Jews. And why don't people tell the truth? I would like Mr. Dawood Qutb to tell the truth. Sir, please tell the truth. You hate them because they are Jews. You want them dead because they are Jews. And now today, one more thing I'd like to tell you, sir. One more thing. Everybody says Israel is using disproportionate force. How else do you think wars are fought? Wars are fought with disproportionate force. There is no other way. Today, America is giving moral sermons to Israel. America is saying it. America that destroyed Afghanistan, that destroyed Iraq, that destroyed the Middle East. The Jews have only retaliated. Tell me which war they started. They started the 67 war. They started the Yom Kippur war in 73. No, they did not. Yes, disproportionate action is happening right now. It's happening in Gaza. It's happening. But that is how all wars are fought. The wars are fought on basis of disproportionate response. There is no proportionate response in war. And my last point, with your permission, Rahul, I would like to add that this entire thing, you see, this two-state solution, which even the government of India is saying, I disagree with the government. There is no two-state solution. This is all absolutely wrong. This friction is mostly religious in nature. Why do you think people in Pakistan, 99.999% of Pakistanis have never seen Israel? Their passport says that this passport is valid for every country on earth except for Israel. Why do the Pakistanis hate Israel so much? Why do the rest of the Muslim countries hate? It is not because of Palestine. They don't hate India so much, with whom they have fought 4 wars,
right,
with whom they have a problem in Kashmir, but they have a problem with Israel because Israelis are Jews, mostly, not all, mostly Jews. The problem is that they are Jews, and that is why they want to kill them.
Well, viewers, the idea behind crux of the matter is that you hear all points of view. This is not a forum for me to pronounce judgment, etc. It's for you to take away all points of view. I've introduced you to 4 points of views. 2 of them seem to be aligned. 2 of them are also aligned on the other side, but with differences. So you've had a fair mix of points of view. And I would like you to now think on these points of view, and we are going to continue this in another episode where we will look for solutions, how to resolve the problem. That's for another week. We leave it at that. Thank you for watching.